At first glance, the Showa era seems kind of goofy and not overall really that powerful, but you'd be very, very surprised at the scaling of this era. People seem to be wondering if the Godzilla from the Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla 1999 movie could actually do anything in this era, and if he'd actually be able to survive. This video will explain that. Starting off with Millennium Godzilla scaling. Obviously, he upscales both Orga and Megaguirus. And yes, I know these are two separate Godzillas that just happen to look very similar, but I'm rolling them into one for this. Both Megaguirus and Orga show pretty consistent large city block levels of power, and possibly even up to actual full-on city level power. However, the scaling gets a little higher when you remember this Godzilla was able to basically take 0 damage from a black hole straight to the face, and arguably even just straight up destroy it using his atomic breath. The size of this black hole basically means that it's not as impressive as a lot of people like to think it is. It was most likely around large star level with the highball. I've seen people try to get this up the solar system. Due to how small the black hole was, that is highly unlikely. However, most consistent scale with this would be somewhere between mid-star level and large star level. There's a kind of dubious way to scale this a little bit higher, and that's if you assume that since this Godzilla universe should share the exact same cosmology as the majority Godzilla universes, then this version of the Godzilla universe should also have supergravity, which is 4-dimensional. It's arguably up to 15-dimensional. However, that's much, much later when we got metas for that. And at this point, it's more likely than not only 4D. 5D if you want to go a little crazy and scale it to some of the Heisei era stuff. But ultimately, you could use supergravity with the black hole, since the black hole should have supergravity in the Godzilla universe, or at least some of them are implied to. However, there's very little evidence for this, and it would be completely headcanon. However, I have seen people argue this before, and for this, I'm going to roll with it, since he's going to need it. Starting off with the first Godzilla film, this one is an easy stomp for Millennium. Gojira in this film only really scales to, at the absolute highest, very low country level, with him being more consistently mountain or island level. This is almost entirely due to his feat, where he boiled a whole lot of seawater, and that energy required to do that is definitely more than most nuclear bombs are capable of. The Action Destroyer would be this Godzilla's only real issue here, and even then, since he does upscale the original Godzilla by such a wide margin, I think he's more likely than not going to be able to survive it, if not just straight up blow up Dr. Serizawa the second he sees him, and not even get hit by the bomb to begin with. Godzilla Reigns again is just as much a stomp for this Godzilla. The Godzilla within that movie is not really that much stronger than the original Godzilla, however he is more agile. This Godzilla, being his replacement in this version of the story, would just dominate. Anguirus couldn't really do much to him, as Anguirus scales below Godzilla and arguably below the original Godzilla, who again was at best low country. This Godzilla's over here at large star. Possibly up to universal if you want to use supergravity scaling, which is very dubious, and if you're doing this for an actual comparison other than putting him in a verse where he is usually going to be massively upscaled, I would highly recommend not using it. As for the original Godzilla vs. King Kong, yeah, Kong's not living here. Not only is this Godzilla massively stronger than the Godzilla from this film, but he's also considerably shown to be more intelligent and a better hand-to-hand fighter. This Godzilla is going to do to Kong what he did to Megaguirus, only probably much, much, much worse, as this Kong is likely weaker than Megaguirus was. Plus, this Kong doesn't have help like Megaguirus had. And the way I see this movie really going is first meeting, Godzilla one-shots him, and it's over. Mothra, well, Mothra doesn't do too hot here. While Mothra is stronger than the Showa Godzilla she fought in this movie, this was back before Showa Godzilla was really strong at all. So, realistically, I don't see her really fighting a much more powerful Godzilla with possible universe scaling if you want to be a little dumb with the scaling like I'm being right now. But even his large star level scaling is enough to easily defeat Mothra and her offspring with very little difficulty. Also, I mean, you could make the argument that Mothra's attacks would weaken him like they do to the Godzilla in the previous movie, but due to the power gap, it's just not going to help much. Here is where things definitely change. Depending on how you scale Ghidorah here, this is basically where it would end, even with the 4D scaling. As a baseline, Ghidorah has surface wipes with subatomic destruction, which is large planetary. However, he also upscales nukes from a certain alien species in the Zone Fighter series that is essentially shown to blow up a gas giant roughly around the size of Jupiter from what we see. And the way it explodes it and how quick it is scales it to damn near solar system. Ghidorah is blatantly stated to be stronger than this, as well as blatantly stated to be stronger than monsters that are stronger than that, who are also stated to be stronger than that, because Zone Fighter gets crazy. However, there's also indications that Ghidorah is more powerful than monsters within Zone Fighter that can essentially create a 4D space, as well as Zone Fighter himself, who can destroy a 4D space, and later gets 100 times more powerful. So, yeah, Ghidorah should be a lot stronger than this Godzilla, and even if he isn't, they scale very relative to each other, with Ghidorah always having a slight edge, because unlike this Godzilla, his 4D scaling is far more concrete, and his normal scaling is solar system to very high solar system, whereas this Godzilla only gets solar system with a highball normally. Of course, he would have Rodan and Mothra helping, but he is realistically weaker than Godzilla would be in this. And ultimately, since it was a very close fight originally, I don't really usually see him winning here. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for this movie and say they're somehow able to pull something off and beat Ghidorah. But since Ghidorah's going to pop up again, yeah, this is not going to turn out well. Invasion of Astro Monster is basically the same as the previous movie, only it's even more dependent on luck. And entirely dependent on how you want to scale Ghidorah here. If you want to lowball him, this Godzilla should survive, but only barely. But if you give them both fair scaling, especially if you give them the scaling that they should realistically have, meaning Ghidorah should be way stronger than this Godzilla, the Godzilla would die here. So if you want to go off real scaling that I would normally do, or most YouTubers would usually do, then Godzilla would die here. But if you're a Super Millennium fan that wants to highball him to super gravity for some unknown reason, then fine. I guess he might have a shot at winning. Well, not really winning, just barely surviving. The next 4 films are really a cakewalk for him. Abertha isn't really doing anything to a Godzilla that's powerful. None of the creatures within any of the movies that really are about Manila are even coming close to harming him. Honestly, I would almost see him just straight up killing Manila for no reason, just because he's a far more evil Godzilla than Showa. And I just don't see anything in the next 4 films doing anything to him whatsoever for any reason. In Godzilla vs. Ghidorah, I see him struggling quite a bit against Ghidorah. Ghidorah is a weird kaiju. His abilities are something that this Godzilla wouldn't really see coming, and his attacks would definitely harm this version of Godzilla. I do see him still winning, since Ghidorah is supposed to be weaker than characters like Ghidorah, but I don't think he's going to win without taking at least some damage here. I definitely think Ghidorah would push him a lot harder than Megaguirus or Orga did. Godzilla vs. Gigan is where I would normally see him dying if you haven't already had him get killed off by Ghidorah. Even with his highest scaling, Gigan would semi-scale to that, if not actually be stronger than he is. And Ghidorah is still far more powerful than he is. I do not see him surviving this movie under any circumstances whatsoever. So normally, if he's not already dead by this point, he would die here. This is where Millennium Godzilla would stop in the Showa era. And yes, I know he has Anguirus' help, but let's face it, Anguirus is not saving him here. There's nothing Anguirus is going to do is going to stop what's going to happen. But let's ignore all logic and assume that he somehow magically wins here. Well, now in Godzilla vs. Megalon, him and Jet Jaguar would go toe-to-toe with Gigan and Megalon. I don't see him winning here either. Honestly, I think Megalon stands a very good chance against him. And Gigan, I think, could honestly beat him in a 1v1, since Gigan scales somewhat to Ghidorah, and this Godzilla scales massively lower in Ghidorah, even when you wink his power like a crazy person by giving him 4D scaling, which there's very little evidence, if any, that he should actually scale to that. So he would probably die here too. As for the first Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, it's even worse. Mechagodzilla makes Ghidorah look like nothing in the Showa era. Even with King Caesar's help, this Godzilla is not doing anything against him. But where things really get unfair is when Mechagodzilla gets even stronger and has an extra buddy to fight him in Terra Mechagodzilla. This Godzilla would already be dead by this point, but if by some magical super miracle he somehow was able to get much stronger, and you were... Let's actually rank his power even higher. Let's assume that magically he scales somewhat to Showa Godzilla, which he doesn't. He would still lose. Because this Godzilla, this Mecha Godzilla, and Titanosaurus at the same time would dominate him. He has no shot at winning against these two. He would literally get bullied. He would get thrown around like a football. Like, he's not doing anything to them. So that is ultimately where I see him getting in the Showa era. I think he does fine pretty much until Ghidorah shows up. And once Ghidorah shows up, he's not doing too hot. Because Ghidorah could kill him in a 1v1 easily. Far easier than he would with Showa Godzilla. I do think he does really good early Showa, but really, really bad with anything that's involved with Ghidorah, Megalon, Gigan, anyone like that. He's not doing hot against. And Mecha Godzilla would bully him so bad it's not even close. Anyways, that's how I see Millennium Godzilla doing in the Showa era. If you disagree, comment why. I'm sure there's going to be some people that think he'd do far better or far worse or whatever. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.